Welcome 24/8 Radio, man. It's been a while since I recorded. Today I'm on my rebuilding community tip. We finna go in with Mr. Reggie Black around about 5:30, probably about 5-10 minute ticks from now. And we're gonna be talking about the Vacant to Vibrant plan. Kind of upset, man, because MC8 was just bumping, man, and for whatever reason, this joint jump off and want to jump to my laptop anytime I mess some on. I don't know why I sync to the laptop. I don't need it to sync to the laptop. I need to play the music. That's what I needed to do. The music cut off. Ain't that a come on, man. Better not mess that up, man. Come on now. Oh, it did. Straight up minutes, man. That was straight up minutes. I can't stand it sometimes. You hear me? Mr. Bill, let me get myself together, man. I ain't got nothing to make myself look attractive. Y'all ain't never like me. Let me be it. Got that V12 in. Parked outside. In my ride, it's on a work some basis. She sleep during the day, but bounce up. Don't kiss the cause she been. Now get your mind right, hater, you a simp. Yeah, I'm finna send him the link now, man. I can't be in quoting this music, y'all, man. Y'all gonna realize. Yeah, that right. That's Mr. Pimp C and Bun B. You gotta. Hey, wait a minute. You know what? I just realized I'm supposed to be talking about rebuilding the community and making the vibe, but I shouldn't be playing that. Look how foul I get sometimes. It's my radio, man. I grew up off that music, so it is what it is. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep it running because I ain't recording probably about 2 weeks. Big cold over there in the studio. I get going to work. They've been putting together. I don't know, but I'm in here doing what I need to do. If you in the DMV and you want to do some streaming wise, podcasting wise, let me know. Cause right now we're gonna be doing it remotely until everything, you know what I'm saying, get back to normal. Cause we had a scare not too long ago, and I ain't trying to get sick dealing with none of y'all. You hear me? So it is what it is. But I'm finna send Mr. Black the link right now. I bet. Oh, you know what? I'm looking at my phone to do it. I'm supposed to do it on her. Time no snow. Yeah. Hold on. Invite. Alright, bet. It's Rocco. Rocco rapping right now. I don't know if y'all can hear it. I bet. He just sent me an email, so I'm gonna send it to him now. I'm gonna close the door. Oh shit. Oh, turn on my Black Panther light. Let's know I'm at home. Yeah, y'all can't see the Black Panther light. It's a little bit out of reach for you. Oh man. Then my ring light keep changing. There's too much going on in my life. Oh, red. We're gonna go red. I'm gonna leave it. See it sit. I cut out in. Oh, it went purple. All right, hold it. The colors on me, man. And I don't know how to stop it. It's like on the panoramic stuff. Okay. Let me see. Let me check on Mr. Black. See if he get the email. Live stream. Why my screen turn blue? What did I do? What? Why the screen turn blue? Man, come on, man. All right, bet. What that was. All right, let me check with him. All right, we 8 minutes in, man. Ain't nobody gonna watch me for 8 minutes and not saying anything. I really ain't got much to talk about, man. I ain't really been thinking about. I ain't wrote out no script. I ain't done nothing like that. Cause I ain't been down here for a while, man. I came in today. I had a few meetings today. I came in. Said let me go up for a little while. Then I'm gonna go play some golf and at Top Golf. And then my cousin. After that, went home. Cause my mama didn't want to get on here. You know, I'm reaching out to everybody right now. Man. I'm just trying to get my content up. You know. So with that being said, if you're on the other side of YouTube right now, which no one is because it's on zero, then you understand me. I don't know, man. I gotta work on this stuff. But I'm finna go out of here if he don't respond back. Or either go back to my music, man. I'm turning my music back up, man. Jesus, it's crazy. I just started another stream. Okay, that's Mr. Black. He just hit me just then. Talking about it said stream yard. Yeah, it said stream yard. I want to know what does vacant or vibrant mean. You know, I don't know. I feel like I am vibrant and I'm vacant. Wait a minute. Is it talking about me? You know, what's it talking about? So hopefully he's gonna pop on here in a minute. And when he pop up, we're gonna go right in. We're gonna get about 15 minutes of content. That means PPA done sat through 9 minutes of content and just looking at my handsome self. You understand me? And then we're gonna get to the business. I don't know. He might not click in. Let me see. Come on, now, Reggie. To the game. I remember when they recorded that one. They got a song called To the Game. Alright, man. Come on, Reggie, where you at? Oh man. I'm gonna change my life, man. I like having color in my life. I ain't gonna tell you that. I like my life color. Oh, he's gone right now, y'all. Welcome to the platform, Mr. Reggie Black. Hey, wait a minute. Look, I'm gonna be on the small screen now. I ain't done this in about a month. Y'all don't talk bad about me. All right, bet. How we gonna do it? Let me see. I gotta figure out how to do it. Okay, we're gonna start out right here. We're gonna start out right here. Good afternoon, Mr. Black. Welcome to 24/8 Radio. My name is Robert Harvey. I go by Harvey 4172. And this is my own little setup, man. It's like a radio, which it ain't really radio, man. I just play my Pandora or whatnot and listen to music and kick back. But today I want to talk to you. I've been hearing about vacant the vibrant, man. I don't know what that really means. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Black?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. Hold on, let me take my headphones out of this thing right quick, then we'll be good to go. All right, bet. Yeah, I couldn't hear you. I had the headphones plugged up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
well, first before we get into that, tell me a little bit about yourself, man. Where are you from?
So I'm a native Washingtonian.
Wait a minute.
I'm a native Washingtonian.
Yeah.
Grew up in Washington, D.C.
Sorry about this, man. I get myself together, man.
Yeah, we hey, it's a process. So you and I is working this as we go. So
yeah, all right, bet. Nah, I couldn't hear you for a minute. Yeah. Did you hear the things I was saying?
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about vacant the vibrant. Yeah, I can hear you now. I want to talk to you about vacant the vibrant, but before I get into that, I would like to know, who are you? Where do you come from? Where do you hail from?
So I'm a native Washingtonian. And I grew up in Southeast. I don't know if people are familiar with the Randall Highlands neighborhood, but it was actually founded by a guy by the name of Arthur Randall. He built a house and a firehouse there in 1910. And that was one of the first groups he was part of the first groups of settlers east of the river. So I grew up there, and just through my time in DC, I've watched a lot of transformation. I've seen, many things. I actually, came up during the 90s and the 2000s. And this was a very, very different city then. Some point along the way in the 2000s, I began to experience extreme poverty, which unfortunately led to me experiencing a decade of homelessness or housing instability, as we call it. And through that experience, I started to learn a lot of like political based education. And it was through, it was actually through being involved with the Street Sense then newspaper. That organization is a media center now, but at the time it was a newspaper that is an economic vehicle for people who were homeless. And going to look for stories kind of got me, politically engaged. So now I'm actually a consumer representative for the governance board for homeless services, our continuum of care, and it is the Interagency Council on Homelessness. And this body is a guidance and implementation sort of like body for the city's response to homelessness. And so around the table there, many government partners. There are a lot of community folks, and myself, people who have lived experience of homelessness. And that's just who I am. I care about our community. I'm born and raised here. I see a lot of the quote unquote prosperity, but I know firsthand, from living here, the people I know aren't necessarily benefiting from a lot of the things that are going on in the city. And I think it would sort of start to warrant a conversation about where do our public dollars go and how are they being used. And this is, sort of getting into to your question, Harvey, about, what exactly is vacant to virus reduction. We actually call it the vacant to virus reduction plan. And
wait a minute,
what
wait,
it
wait,
is.
wait a minute, Reg, is it vacant to virus or vacant to virus?
So our community plan is called vacant to virus reduction.
Okay.
We call it V2VR. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
The name is a play on words.
Yeah, because I thought we were saying vacant virus.
Yeah, vacant to virus. As in coronavirus. Right?
Oh, okay. Now, I gotta go back and change it.
Play on words, and I see how people get it confused because the mayor also had an initiative. It was called Vacant to Vibrant. And that initiative was an effort to basically surplus land that the city had held for. So I'm in my 30s, and properties that I know have now gone on the auction block through that initiative, they were vacant when I was in high school. When I was in, middle school, we're talking about 98, 97, 99, 2000, 2001, right? These properties went undeveloped in communities that historically haven't been invested in. So we basically have entered, an unprecedented time. And through our work in many different spaces, including development, advocacy, direct outreach and services, and engagement, these different silos sort of went into a collapse mode when the coronavirus pandemic started. And through that, we did have a little extra time to try to work our heads around how do we help the unhoused or the homeless? How do we help them social distance? And we had always talked about, we had always asked the question, how many units do we have in the city? How many are vacant? How many are occupied? So we started asking that question, and it led us to discover that actually there are, and I don't know how many of y'all out there are living in the District of Columbia. I don't know how many of you are working in the District of Columbia. I know there are, people paying property taxes, business commercial taxes, those types of things. But there right now is a excess of vacant units in the District of Columbia. About 10,000 or so vacant 10,000 units. Yeah. And the Office of the Chief Financial Officer has put these numbers out there and says that that's a healthy market. Further sort of like research into those findings from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer have shown us that now in the District of Columbia, we have 10,000 vacancies, and those 10,000 vacancies are actually spread across only 3,000 buildings. Okay. So that means, according to the chief financial officer, that a healthy market in the District of Columbia rental market entails that you have at least 3 vacancies in your building, and that's a healthy market. And you know, we know through a lot of our work with the Interagency Council on Homelessness and other bodies that we work with, that in the District of Columbia there's a need level of people who are experiencing homelessness to the tune of 10,000 unique households. We actually was trying to sort of estimate or project what our numbers would look like over time. So I don't know if people know, but in the District of Columbia, there are several things you need to know about. One is there is an entire law that talks about how homeless services are provided, and it's called the Homeless Services Reform Act. And that law lays out how we're going to provide emergency services and stabilization services for people who are experiencing homelessness. And we only get a certain percentage of, say, you know, units every year to help those people. So what happens, because we have limited resources, each mayoral administration essentially has to come up with their strategic plan to try to end homelessness. Before the Bowser administration, they were in intervals of 10 years. When Mayor Bowser started her first term, that strategic plan was cut down to 5 years. And so in it, we talked about and had a lot of aspirational goals. So now we try to update that plan. And of course, we have to have all of these different things in writing by law. We have to have a strategic plan. We have to have representation from people who are, you know, homeless in decisions. And through that update, we learned that there was an annual sort of like yearly demand for homeless services in the tune of 10,000 people. So so that's kind of a, you know, that's kind of a weird.
What year was that? When did you find out it was annually around?
So the office of the Chief Financial Officer's report is from 2019, last year, the end of last year. Okay. The 10,245 unique households needing homeless services also was of that same time last year in December 2019, because we were just updating that plan. Right. You know, we were literally on the singles part, looking at how many people have come in the system throughout 1 year. You know,
can I ask you this question? Yeah. How many of those properties, those vacant properties, are actually for working class, or are they vacant properties that are from the, you know, upper echelon, or where are they located? Like, are they scattered throughout the city, or are they?
That is a unique question, because we have done. So we got curious. So we got very curious about that very question. Okay. The Chief Financial Officer is reporting 10,000 vacancies. So what kind of buildings are we looking at? And they are in classes A, B, and C. And class A units are sort of like those luxury apartment units or condos, right? Then you have class B units. Some of them are under rent control. They've gone over some renovation. Then you have class C units, which are a little older than those. They may have, you know, historic preservation or something, but class C units typically are probably the ones that are in the most disrepair and need the most work. But, you know, we're talking about places that are for you know, in 6-unit apartment buildings that may be class C. You may be looking at, you know, buildings that are about maybe 50, 60 units as a class B. And now some of the newer higher end developments, which some of them have excess unit levels of about maybe 100 units or more, because some of these projects come in more of that. Those would be your Class A units. So if you were to just take one Class A, one Class B, and one Class C, you would have 9 units because there's an average of 3 units per building. And these buildings are spread all over the city. And we're finding convergences in buildings we have started to identify that possibly have vacancies. And now we're actually accessing information on these particular entities having a certain level of public subsidy already in the building. So, you know, we have a lot of initiatives and programs in DC to try to, we're the subsidized city, right? We're the federal city. So we try to in a lot of ways pay for everything. You know what I'm saying? We try to pay for construction. We try to pay for, we try to pay for the housing assistance. We try to pay different agencies and that type of thing. We try to pay them, to do the services. So taxpayers are really paying a lot of this stuff. They're really actually paying a lot of this stuff in actuality. And in a lot of times we find that people are not like involved with it. Like they're not involved in some of these main decision points and spaces to make those decisions, right? Like you're you know what I'm saying? Take you, for example, Harvey. You're working, right now. Let's say, you're doing, 40, plus hours a week, right? Then you're paying state taxes, right? And then you start hearing stuff on the news that the city government is spending, $200 million on a streetcar, right? They're spending $100 million in the Housing Production Trust Fund. So they're basically telling you, okay, these are some of the things that we're putting your money to. But then when you start asking about, well, if I'm putting my money in, they're getting a benefit of my money. What am I getting out of this?
Right.
You know what I mean? And a lot of times.
Let me ask you this, Reggie, because this is what I want to lead our conversation, because a lot of people that are moving to the city, we have a transient city kind of. And a lot of people really don't know, because when we see the mayor on TV, she's always talking about what she's doing to affect the homeless situation and the housing situation. She doesn't speak so much about the homeless as she does we're building affordable housing, we're building affordable housing, we're building affordable housing. And so if you're not heavily engaged in the community organizing, or if you're not paying attention to what's going on, and you believe that your representatives are being fairly honest with you, what's the contrast? Because we have 10,000 homeless people that need shelter right now during this virus, basically. How have they adjusted? What has been the adjustment from the city government into resolving the issue of people not having a place for shelter?
Man, that's been all over the, because we've been just really working on this issue day in and day out since the pandemic started. One of the things that really sort of like disappointed me was that we, for a period of time, had stopped housing placements completely. And during that time of us stopping housing placement, we ended up having a community spread level of over 300. Actually, I could take a look at maybe the latest number today for you, because that is this astounding. There were cities in May claiming that they didn't have any cases, which in my view would mean that they didn't have any deaths, So you're talking about, and I'm looking at it now as of last night, there were 335 people in the homeless community tested positive, and 21 of those people who tested positive have died. So that just shows us where we are, really, you know. And
So
we
they have
allow
a
that to happen because we're not paying for non-congregate shelter. We're not trying to, we're not trying to force places, like the Wharf and the Marriotts and the Hiltons, and we're not forcing them to help us provide rooms for people who could benefit from them. I mean, we have regulated people to being outside. There were people actually advocating for people to stay outside because, we know our congregate shelters, you really couldn't social distance in our shelters. So the recommendation for a lot of people, unofficially was you're better off out
standing outside. Well, tell me this right here. This is what I want to know about as well. It's kind of like with all of this construction going on around here, kind of like the Wharf.
Yeah.
You brought up the Wharf. Like, are they creating? What are they doing about the people that they're displacing, like from the Wharf? Because I know the Wharf is totally changed in the time that I've been here. I've only been here like 5 years, so I'm like the whole Wharf is totally different. Like, what's the remedy to just shifting people around? Like, if it was 10,000 people in 2019. And now we have a pandemic and it's still 10,000 people. It doesn't seem like they're really eradicate homelessness in our city. So, I mean, speak toward how they're moving people around and that.
Yeah.
Or
there
building really, construction part.
There are so many ways that people are being moved around and moved out. First off, the price of housing in the city overall is already, it's already too high, right? It's already too high.
Right.
You know what I mean? So as people sort of fall through that economic hardship, they start to encounter that things that could have been safety nets for them have disappeared. For example, public housing. Now we have lost over half of our over half of our affordable housing stock over the last, and this was this was the talk as of 2014 when we commemorated those who have passed away while homeless, and we know that the city, they give out land, discounted, $1, $10. Then they turn around and give these entities our tax money, $40, $50, $60, $70,000, $100,000 sometimes, for different products. And then the people that need the services and these products, for whatever reason, they can't access it. It ends up being their credit. It ends up being their income. It ends up being their criminal history, which we have done a lot of work to now negate that. There's amenity fees. There's holding fees. There are all kinds of things that get in the way of people accessing a place to live with a subsidy. We haven't even talked about how do people fall into homelessness. Right now we're talking about, how inaccessible housing is, even with a government subsidy. So and then we don't have a lot of those. So there are people who end up timing into chronic homelessness, right? They start getting used to the environment that they are in. So in this thing right here, in this health emergency, it's even worse, because they can't move around. Yeah. They're in a congregate setting, and you really only have two choices. You can either be outside or be in there, right? And neither one are safe, really. The city started contracting hotels. We just updated the criteria for that. But at the same time, now I hear there's a wait list for something that's supposed to help people who we said were at risk for this virus. And they're still not clear on why do homeless people refuse to go. What is in the rule feeding them that makes them say no.
Reggie,
You
this
know
is
what
what
I mean?
I want to ask you about. Is the mayor just built a whole bunch of new shelters from? If I'm a novice, I don't really know. I heard she just built like a gang of new homeless shelters. Is that not right?
Mm-hmm.
Did she?
So just to take a step back for a second,
right.
The mayor during her campaign was just one voice adamant about closing down DC General.
Definitely. I went over there and protested.
The entire community wanted that place closed. So when she came into the administration, one of the first things that we had to work on in that first iteration of the strategic plan to end homelessness, and if you go to ichdc.gov, you can see that copy of it. There's a section in that plan that talks about system transformation. I believe it's chapter 2 or 3. And the system transformation talks about breaking down these larger shelters and creating smaller ones and putting them in various places throughout the city. Much like what has happened with what we call short-term family housing. So the mayor and the city council went through this, sort of like long drawn out process to me to identify sites where new shelters could be. One of those was a single woman's shelter, which that property appears in Ward 2. And then there were properties in Wards 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 that also had a family shelter constructed out there. But that system transformation section of Homeward DC, and we're calling the second version of this 2.0, the original Homeward DC, you will see that entire section is predicated on the redevelopment of the entire low barrier system, including Second and D, which is the creative community for nonviolence. As a matter of fact, some of the initial guiding principles they attempted to place in these different projects around the city actually comes from work we conducted during that time in 2014 with what is the CC&V task force. So the whole idea from the beginning then was to build all of these new shelters, and they're mostly for families. So going back to, the information that DC has a law which talks about how they're going to provide shelter services and stabilizing housing services. In there, it specifies how families access shelter and what form that takes. You know what I mean? So they have a different form of shelter requirements than singles. So they had to build facilities from the scratch, basically, to adhere to our law. And we've had iterations of the Homeless Services Reform Act since the 1980s, which the initial legislation was Initiative 17. And for people who don't know what Initiative 17 is or was, it was actually a voter led initiative organized by the Creative Community for Nonviolence and Mitch Snyder and all those guys in the 80s to try to get people who were homeless in DC just in the shelter. So they put forth a ballot initiative which actually passed, that election year. So DC became one of the first cities in the nation to start to spell out how would it provide emergency housing services. And a lot of people don't know that we have that. A lot of states and cities do not have that spelled out in law, how you're going to provide all of that. So the law says that families they have to have a bathroom, they have to have a four-walled structure and a roof, and it has to be able to be locked from the inside. So we decided to build programs based on that. But ever since Initiative 17, the District of Columbia has never built a shelter from scratch. It has always repurposed buildings. We had a law in play by the voters. I understand, some methodology behind that with the city government. You can't really take too long to shelter homeless people with a law like that in play because they had an elevated level of lawsuits. So the district never really got into building its shelters from the ground. It just was repurposing buildings that had no business being shelters. And that is what compounds the problem with COVID-19 today, because we're in repurposed buildings. There's poor ventilation, plus they're large congregate settings. I actually stayed in a shelter in Southeast, which in the height of winter, you could get 400 people in that building. So that just gives you a picture of what we're dealing with here and the nature of the beast.
Well, can you answer me this question? What's the largest new homeless shelter they've built, like occupancy wise? Like, are they building large occupancy homeless shelters, or are they smaller than what DC General was? I know DC General was a hospital, but I'm just saying, in contrast to having 10,000 homeless people to the amenities they're trying to build to solve that equation, is it rational, like the amount of openings of the homeless shelters compared to the problem?
In my view, no, it isn't, because we're talking about, and I was just on the call earlier for the board that I serve, one of our standing committees, and there was conversation about, there was conversation about finally now phasing out the Days Inn motel.
You talking about New York Avenue?
Yeah. So the idea behind putting all those shelters, in different parts of the city was to get out of those hotels. You know what I mean? We had been paying thousands and thousands upon thousands of dollars to pin families up in hotels, period. Because we didn't have the space. You had 200 and something families in DC General. Then at the time, we ended up at the height of that, almost 300 families in DC General and almost 600 families in hotels throughout the city and in Maryland. See, they hide that a lot of times. We used to contract maybe about 3 to 5 hotels in Maryland to house DC homeless families. So we could get them a voucher, or they could earn enough income to secure a unit. So that was sort of the environment we're in. But now we're talking about, breaking down the larger, sort of like close to 300 family shelter and breaking it down into seven shelters with, say, at the most 50 units each. And not all of those buildings can accommodate 50 straight units for shelter. Right. I've seen close up 3 of them. The Triumph, which is in Ward 8. I took an extensive tour of that. I watched and observed the construction of the Horizon, which is in Ward 7. I actually attended the groundbreaking for the Kennedy, which is in Ward 4. When we come out of COVID, I know we're going to get invited to a groundbreaking for what is called the Brooks. That is in Ward 3. And then there, I believe, is the Sterling and the Aya in Wards 5 and 6. And so all of these facilities, one, they're built with the intention of helping homeless families during a housing crisis. It's supposed to be short-term family housing. But, you're you're talking about you're not talking about a lot of family units there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, so we're talking about phasing out, you know, overflow shelter, the motels, but you're still talking about 300 families, which 300 families can equate into 300 families could easily equate into, you know, 500, 600 people, depending on family composition within that 300 people. You see that 300 household thing. Because see, this is how agencies and entities count. They don't count person by person by person. You get that later in extra detail. They just go by household. They just go by heads of household. So if you have a 300 head of household number, you know, and let's say we know a little bit more, you know, deliberative information about maybe gender, how many dependent children, you know, then we start looking at how many numbers of persons that is, and that's way high. That's usually way higher than the individual household number. So with all of these people, like, where are we going to put them? You know what I mean? If they can't get into, okay, if I got 10,000 people, 10,000 unique households, right? Does that make sense to me or not?
You kind of went out just then. It refract
because
out.
And I'm listening to somebody say that 3 vacancies per building in the District of Columbia out of 3,000 buildings is the things and that are essential to what is going on there.
Yeah, something. Well, listen, I want to say this to you. Look, we're coming up on about 50 minutes now. I try not to record over an hour because of the attention spans of people when they're on YouTube and all these things watching this. So in wrapping up, I would like to ask you 2 questions, my brother. One being, again, for the people, tell them what vacant to virus plan is, and 2, if you could have one, you know, like one message to tell everybody, like to tune in, to go here and look for this, or even if you want to reference PPA, please do so, sir.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So if people want to understand what, you know, vacant to virus reduction is, you can check out the People Power Action. We also, and I believe Mr. Harvey can get you to some information and a flyer about sessions we do on the plan. I just went through some of the facts that, you know, that we have over 6,000 people homeless in DC, 10,000 vacant apartment units across 3,000 buildings, and that the United Nations feels public authorities should be empowered to make available privately owned vacant housing. And the method behind that is to use the vacant properties to house the unhoused. Instead of giving, you know, our money and land to developers, take the financing and use that money to make sure people have access to good units that are empty. In a nutshell. And the reasons we want to do this is that housing is a human right and need. Housing is physical and mental and emotional health care. Housing is needed for proper social distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19, and also homelessness, incarceration, and related health costs are more expensive than housing. And if you want to learn more, you can contact myself. You can email me at reggieblackich@gmail.com, or you can send me a voice message or text at 202-642-1987. And I can put you in contact with either one of the organizations that you would wish to engage with and working on a plan. One of them is the People Power Action, which is a group of incredible leaders who are using community knowledge and power to motivate change and community power and community control over land and development. And also the People for Fairness Coalition, which is working to end housing instability in the District of Columbia through advocacy, outreach, and peer mentoring. So email me, email Harvey, text me, text Harvey. We can work on this, and we need your help. If you live in a Class A luxury unit out there, Class B, Class C unit, you see a vacant unit there, man, ask your landlord, can I give or help you find a tenant? This tenant may be homeless, but they could use this vacant unit. We need y'all.
Right. Okay. And now let me chime in and wrap up. We've been shooting for 50. Now I want to say, look, there's two types of people in this world. There are leaders and there are followers. You have just engaged a good hour of listening to a leader. He's not only experienced these conditions, he's out here in the street advocating for change with these conditions. And you need to turn your ears on and listen to us, because the only way change is going to come about in this world if we make it happen. Not pass the baton, but we can make it happen right now in real time. We are members of PPA, which stands for People Power Action. We're trying to grow our coalition and as well educate the community about what the city is truly doing to us. Mr. Black, I really appreciate it, man. We missed one another for about 2, 3, 4 times, but we finally got a chance to get it in, my man. I'm telling you, you inspire me, man. When you start talking, I start listening. And that's the truth,
and
man.
it's vice versa, because knowledge is power. We each have a stake in that, man. You in the lab, I see you in the lab, I'm in my lab, and we come together. We come together, and I want to emphasize that the community does have power. We are just two examples of that. And others that are listening to us and watching us, I want to say to you, you are power as well.
Right.
That's why we're called People Power.
There you go. There you go. Preach, my brother. Preach, my brother. Listen, so what happened? I'm finna end the broadcast, and I'm finna send you the link so you can go back and watch it. Listen, for the first about 10 minutes before you came up, it's gonna be me on there. It's gonna be a little bit of music, but after that, the information is gonna get great. Cause Mr. Black just dropped a whole lot of stuff you can go research. He dropped a whole lot of links and everything else. Peace, my brother, and love until the end. You hear me?
I'll send you some stuff that you may need to send with it if you want.
I bet. I'll talk to you later.
All right.